David Edward and Jason Barnard discuss Jason's book, The Fundamentals of Brand SERPs.
Jason, how are you?
I'm absolutely fine. I just clicked on the got it button from Zoom, which says you have to agree. So I hope nothing was cut.
Well, now the problem is Zoom knows you got it. So, now there's a whole tracking component to this. So Jason, we're going to talk about your book called The Fundamentals of Brand SERPs, and you'll explain what a SERP is. But I have to tell you, disappointingly, I'm not going to open this with a song. So if you know what that reference is, and if anyone else knows what that reference is, you can tell them.
I can sing a song for
I wasn't
David
soliciting for
Edward.
one. So you have your own podcast and you talk to people about the things that you're an expert in. And I think you opened the podcast where you sing their names and stuff to them, which I thought was hilarious.
Yeah, the song is actually a quick hello and we're good to go. Welcome to the show, David Edward.
Yeah.
But my initial career was a singer. So
okay, that's interesting.
It's kind of cheating. That's kind of easy for me. I was a singer for 10 years. Then I was a child. I created content for children, including being a singer.
Okay.
So my principal talent is actually singing and not Google.
Interesting. Okay. Well, so multi-talented is the term we can go with, I guess.
Yeah, and I just realized actually the fact that I might or might not be talented at singing is totally a question of opinion. Some people might have hated that and thought it was rubbish.
Well, look, just like me, I claim I've written 45 books. Some people will claim some of them might not be good enough to be called a book. So it's it's all in the eye of the beholder, I guess, as they say. So Jason, yeah. We're talking in English, but if I remember correctly, and I was going through your grade reports, I went through, up to 16 and all of that. And I saw that you live in France now, but when you were in what we would call high school in America, French really wasn't a language that you excelled in. Is that right?
100%. I was in the north of England, and the north of England, it's really English. And I flunked every French exam I ever took. I mean, flunked. I don't know how you would put it, but right to the bottom of flunkdom. And ended up in France for a very obscure reason, ended up joining a band, becoming a singer, and learning French to the point at which now I'm bilingual. I mean, honestly, for me now, it doesn't make any difference which language I'm speaking.
Well, which language do you write in?
Either. But interestingly enough, in French, I find it much more difficult, although I write quite well, because I don't feel that I have the grammatical knowledge.
Oh, the authority, the agency, whatever that is.
Yeah. But speaking, absolutely no difference at all. But writing, I definitely say I'm very uncomfortable in French. But that said, I'm actually quite uncomfortable in English as well.
That's okay. General. So good. So I can see why you became a writer.
Right, yeah. I mean, but isn't that part of it is that when we write something, we're convinced that it isn't perfect. And we think, oh, I can do better, or I can change, or I can, and we have this idea of moving towards perfection that doesn't exist.
Yeah. Well,
I struggle with that greatly.
So let's talk about that, because your book is about how companies or businesses can understand and manage how easy they are to find and what is findable about them to come at it that way, which is a form of writing in and of itself. And then you've written a book.
Very good point.
Around how to write that way so that when people search for you, they find what you want them to find. Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, it's very much a branding book. It's saying, you've worked really hard on your brand message. You write and you figure it out and you communicate. How do you make sure that Google understands how you want it to present you to your audience when they search on Google? So it's all about branding on Google and making sure that the work that you put in to make sure that your brand message is perfect for your audience is reflected by Google when that audience is actually using Google.
As writers, that's something that we care about to some degree, because our author name and what we write becomes a brand. I mean, Stephen King is a brand, and it's just his name. I'd be interested in the Amazon search engine. And my understanding is that, well, Google's the biggest, Amazon is like the third or fourth biggest or something.
It depends on the topic.
Well, book. I was thinking books.
Yeah, no, in books, the thing is, Google has got the research and Amazon has got the sale.
Yeah.
And so from a sales perspective, focus on Amazon. From a getting famous perspective, focus on Google. But Google are not going to let Amazon walk all over them. Google are going to pick up. They've got Google Books. You can expect Google Books to become this massive sales driver of books in the future. So it's a really good idea to prepare the terrain now.
That's interesting. Yeah. So your book, I mean, this is a topic that I think anyone watching this podcast is an author or a writer would be super interesting. So what's some of the top advice you give in the book? And then also give me a little bit of the history about how did this book come about? There was a day where you weren't writing this book, and then there was a day you were writing this book. What happened between those 2 days?
Right. Yeah. I mean, the first thing is what appears when somebody Googles your brand name, your personal name, or your book name is phenomenally important. People use Google. I mean, if you say to me, David Edward, who is he? I search your name on Google.
Yeah.
And the result is fairly ambiguous, difficult to figure out which one we're talking about. That for me is a huge problem. So obviously I'm not giving you advice about what you need to do, but definitely an ambiguous name like that is a problem. And there's a question of dominance. And as an author, you need to be famous to dominate, excuse me, and so on and so forth. And in terms of writing the book, in terms of searching the name of your book, if you're saying to somebody, I wrote a book called Catfish Eyes and Potatoes, you want to make sure that the result that Google shows for Catfish Eyes and Potatoes is absolutely what you want.
Yeah.
And that it's going to convince the person to then buy and read the book Catfish Eyes and Potatoes.
Yeah,
so
I'm gonna have to read your book, by the way, because I've completely screwed it up. My pen name, David Edward, is very generic, and then my big hit is called Panama Red, and people search for that when they want marijuana. So I'm so far outside of the channels.
Well, and that's a huge point, and I've been thinking about it more and more. You have to be really careful when you're thinking about what the name of your book is, or the title of your book, and what pen name you should use.
Yeah.
And David Edward is typically terribly ambiguous. David, I don't know what your middle name is. P. Edward is immediately less ambiguous. David Peter Edward is immediately even more unambiguous.
Okay.
So as an author starting out, think about what your pen name is. As an author publishing a book, think about what the book name is to make sure that it is, it hits that line between non-ambiguity, excuse me, and being clear about what you're talking about.
Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't think about any of that.
All right, I spent every day thinking about this.
Yeah, but you're right, and for authors, especially people that I self-publish my books. I got no one to help me with this, and I can name them anything I want. I mean, it's not like I write one book I've got called Drive Faster. I just like the name. It's my hat says Drive Faster, but when you type Drive Faster into Google, you don't get my book.
No, and that can be a problem, but it's also an advantage in the sense that if you can get your book to become a reference for that term, Drive Faster, you immediately vastly increase your sales and your popularity because you're at the top of Google, and Google thinks that your book is important. So there is a whole playoff between ambiguity, non-ambiguity.
Interesting.
Can I dominate or not? And how much am I willing to put into this to actually dominate? So if you want to dominate for Drive Faster, you've got a huge job. But if you manage to nail that job, you're going to be incredibly visible on Google, and you will probably make absolutely boatloads of sales. And then the question is, why did I write the book? It's an experiment.
That's what I was going to say. And were you nervous about starting it, about taking on, the project of writing a book? What was your thought process? Just walk us through that.
Right. Well, actually, it started with some people published a book called The Brand SERP Guy, and that's my pseudonym. And they were doing it because they wanted to appear when somebody searched my name because they wanted to steal my thunder.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody said to me, take them to court. And I said, no, I'm not going to take them to court. I'm going to get rid of them. And there were multiple options, one of which was to write a book called The Brand SERP Guide.
Yeah.
And I said, that would be too easy. What I'm going to do is write a book called The Fundamentals of Brand SERPs, which is actually useful for the human race, that actually helps businesses better understand your Google business card, what your audience sees when they Google your brand name, and also gets rid of these people who, and basically what they did is copy paste bits of text from all over the web.
Yeah.
It was a piece of spam. And then I thought, okay, if I'm going to write a book, what I'm going to do is I'll probably do it wrong. So I talked to Scott Turman from Bright Ray Publishing, and he and his company then helped me to write the book. So my first experience was having the book written with me. It wasn't ghostwriting, it was a partnership with a lady called Emily Barnard. And honestly, she made it 100 times better than it would otherwise have been.
Yeah.
If I'd have written on my own, it would have been very geeky. And she rewrote it, and I said, no, that's all wrong. And she's saying, well, I haven't understood. And so in that case, I must have explained it very badly. And we ended up with this kind of balance between her understanding and me coming down to the level where other people could understand me. And it's absolutely brilliant. I mean, it's a page turner, and I'm really proud of that. But it's my content with immense help from Bright Ray and Emily Bartov.
It's funny you say that, because the content is bang on. It is very well presented. But I thought that the outline and the incremental way the book introduces the topic and walks you through. I mean, it starts with your, if you have your homepage, it starts something very personal, and then kind of works its way through everything. I just thought that was a really smart way to introduce it, and it does make the book very accessible.
I can tell you that's Emily right down the line. Definitely not me.
Well, that's good though. That's good. And some authors wouldn't have taken that advice. So I think being an author and knowing what advice to take and what advice not to take is a very big deal. And it's not easy. People think it's easy, but it's only obvious in hindsight. And by then it's too late.
And no, absolutely. It's huge. When somebody says this doesn't make sense, not say, oh, you just don't understand because you're not paying attention. Yeah. Say, why doesn't it make sense? And how am I misexpressing it? And it's my fault. If I'm trying to communicate something and the other person doesn't understand it in the way I intended, it's my fault.
Yeah, no, it is a writer. Yeah, one of the questions I ask people, I get that a lot. This doesn't make sense or whatever. And so I'll ask them, well, what do you think it says? And that at least helps me understand what I tried to say and then what they read or heard or whatever. So it's a nice way to.
Sorry, it made me think of something really interesting, because one thing is that experience with somebody who actually knows how to tell a story, knows how to write, was incredibly helpful. I mean, I was talking to you earlier on. I've actually just written 35,000 words in 2 weeks, and then recorded it as video in a day and a half. Yeah. And what stunned me is that I could read off the teleprompter pretty much without making a mistake. And the reason for that is that I learned from that first experience. By doing it with somebody who actually knew what they were talking about, my second effort was 1,000 times better than my very first effort. And I think that's a huge, huge point, is know who to listen to them, get it right, and the next time it's going to be 100 times easier. Yeah.
Well, and, we didn't talk about it too much, but 35,000 words, reading 35,000 words in a quality that other people can hear it in 2 days is its own accomplishment. That's a brutal task.
So it was 2 weeks for the writing and 2 days for recording.
Yeah.
So the 2 weeks, it was a real struggle. Every day I got up and I was thinking, I have to write 4,000 to 7,000 words today. And I talked to my daughter and I said, I only managed 4,000. And she said, most people can't get through 200 or 500.
Yeah.
And I think that's another point from my perspective, at least, is I force myself.
Yeah.
It's so tempting just to kind of get up and walk around and go out and do something, go to the park or whatever. And I say, no, I have to do this today. I've set myself this target. I'm going to hit that target. I'll reward myself with, a cold beer in the evening, or, a nice evening out at a restaurant. I'll reward myself, but I have to obey and stick to what I set myself as a target for today.
I think that produces the better writing. That's how I do it. Fourth, I'm not. I don't. I've had days where I mean, I think my biggest day is like 6,500 words, but not that often. Um,
Right.
but yeah, 4,000 would be a lot. But I mean, on the weekends, I'll try and do 2 or 3,000 a day. And
Yeah, well, can I make a
yeah,
point
yeah,
which differentiates here? Because you're making it up as you go along. You're trying to write a story, you're writing a story that invents itself. I'm explaining something that I know so fundamentally well.
yeah.
It's simply a question of taking what's in my brain and putting it on a piece of paper, as it were. So, writing 4 to 7,000 words when you know your subject as well as I do is relatively easy compared to where am I taking this story? How am I going to develop this character? Where am I going with the book?
Right.
Which I think is hugely, hugely something I couldn't do. And I'm glad you're doing it and not me.
Well, I'm glad you're writing how to market on Google and other search engines because, well, like I said,
Yeah.
clearly, you talked about it. Maybe, if I reset all this up, maybe I'll do a lot better job after reading your book, because the first time I did it, I didn't consider any of the things that you're saying are important, which I believe are important. Well, so let's get to that. So the book's been out. It came out in January, I think, of this year. Is there anything that has surprised you about the reception of the book or about having it out, or any of the feedback you got, good or bad?
Yeah, I was absolutely stunned by the fact that, as you say, it's actually quite easy to read.
Yeah.
And Emily helped me make it accessible to any marketer, any brand manager, no SEO experience, no knowledge of Google. And I sent it to a lady called Marie Haynes, who is an absolute master of Google. And she said, I read it over the weekend. I wish I'd read it 5 years ago. This is absolutely brilliant. This is the best book ever.
I read it.
And
Yeah.
no, I was stunned because she knows so much. And she was saying, it's a totally new approach to Google. And that was an immense pleasure for me, because somebody I respect that much says to me, I've written something that's changed her perspective.
Oh, and it's a good approach, because you say, what do you want out of this thing? Here's how you get it, versus here's all the 800 ways that it works. And, and you can try this or try that, so I thought it was very good. I thought it was a very good approach.
Oh, well, you might just have got Emily another job, because I've just written those 35,000 words. I'm going to turn that into a book, because it's actually a video course.
Okay.
And I've written exactly what you said, is this kind of very factual thing that doesn't have a flow.
Yeah.
And I think maybe I might well be missing the flow, and I might well need help.
It's amazing how the same information just packaged in a way that the human brain can accept it. It's I mean, the exact same thing can be seen as terrible, or can be seen as brilliant. And it's amazing. The pieces to get there are not the pieces that you necessarily think they are. Now, I do have a question. It looks like the paperback is outselling the Kindle version. At least it's higher ranked, which I find fascinating, given that the entire topic is a digital concept.
Right. Oh, look, that's really interesting. You've done that research. I didn't think you'd do that.
We got to talk about something. Yeah,
No, there's a very good reason.
Okay.
With CaliCube, I built a SaaS platform, a software as a service platform that agencies use. And what they do is they buy the paperback version and give it to the client, because the paperback version gets the client on board with what they're doing without the client necessarily knowing anything about Google.
Right.
So the paperback is sold in packs of 10 to agencies who distribute it for free to their clients, so their clients understand what they're talking about.
Brilliant. Brilliant.
That's something it's not something I expected. That's a total surprise.
Raise the price. That's where you're making your money. That's great. That's good.
Yeah, but I work with agencies as well, so I mean, I'm kind of getting multiple sources of income. But what is delightful is that number that you spotted that I didn't think anybody else in the world had ever seen, is that what I'm talking about is totally obvious when you think about it. What appears when somebody Googles my name or my book name or my company name? And once you think about it, you're saying, why didn't I ever look at this before?
Yeah.
And the book answers the question, what do you need to do?
That's right.
That's
right. Yeah.
Agencies in my industry are saying, well, actually, we hadn't thought about this, but we buy the book, we give it to the client then gets on board, and it's really easy to work with them, because it's a philosophical approach, is saying Google is a child. Our job is to educate it about who we are, what we do, and who our audience is. And when you say it like that, you say, I've got this content, I'm going to package it for Google, tell it my brand message, ensure that it understands who I am, what I do, and who my audience is, then I'm winning the game.
I think that's right. I mean, look, if I could afford a manager, I would be the worst client ever. But if I read this book, I'm being serious. Because I'd be like, no, stupid. If I read this, would be like, okay, at least now I understand why you're asking me some of these things and why maybe I have to spend some of my what I consider valuable time, worrying about it. So I think you're onto something. I think it's a really good niche, and it's a very personal niche, especially for writers. I think, I know businesses and all that can get very, very bigger, but for writers, our brand and our books and our name and all that is really in that first circle of things we got to worry about, because we're trying to convince people what we've written is interesting.
No, 100%. I think and also when you look at Google, it's saying also which other authors does Google associate me with?
That's right.
At which point, if it associates me with Stephen King, I potentially get a presence when somebody searches Stephen King and it says, oh, you might be interested in this author too. That's where the Google catching up with Amazon thing comes in.
Yeah.
That's what Google is now doing. So you need to make sure Google understands who you are, what you're writing, and who your audience is and what other authors they would be interested in, so that Google can then associate and make those recommendations that we see so easily on Amazon.
Yeah.
And
the whole world's an algorithm now. Blech.
Sure. But it's all about us taking responsibility for making sure that what is out there on us, or about us, sorry, on the web is honest, accurate, and clear for Google. And with Amazon, it's relatively easy because it's a closed environment. It's a walled garden, as we call it.
What? It's not as easy. I have a book, and it's got 24 reviews, all good except for one. The very last review it got, Amazon decided that was its top review. So that is now when the review, it shows everyone. It says, the guy's a hack, the book sucks. It's like, wait, what? But so there's the, and by the way, culturally, Amazon is having its own problems with its review system. I don't want to get too into it, but if you've heard of Power of the Rings, whatever it is, they were unhappy with the thing that we all as authors have to live with every day. And of course, they're on the inside, so they've changed and manipulated it, which I just find interesting. I don't know if it's good or bad, but it's just interesting. All right. So,
well, I think we're in a situation where Google is going to position itself as the independent source.
Yeah,
because it's going to be saying Amazon is this walled garden where you can put pressure on them, they will change something because it's all controlled by Amazon. Yeah. Whereas Google's saying we're just looking at the whole web, so we're presenting the web's opinion of you.
Right. If they could get to that, I don't trust any of them, but I do trust Google results a little more than Amazon results. Now that you mention it, and I never thought about why, but yeah, I don't. I mean, trust isn't the right word. I have more confidence in. I don't know what the word is, but yeah,
Well, I mean, Google are drawing from the entire web. That's their big thing. So what they're saying is, we're presenting you with a balanced overview of the web's opinion of you as an author or your book.
Right.
And that's huge, because as a Google user, I trust Google. I look at that and I think, okay, fine. I kind of believe Google more than Amazon, because for me, Amazon's constantly trying to upsell something.
Right.
And Google, in this situation at least, isn't. How it's going to evolve, that's going to be incredibly interesting. But certainly taking control today is absolutely a no-brainer. If you're not doing it, you're in my opinion, fool. Sorry to insult people.
All right. Well, so so Jason, let's wrap it up. We're out of time, but so just to close for you, people that don't buy your book are fools. Anything you want to add to
that? Oh dear, that's not quite how I put it, but you've rephrased it in a terribly embarrassing
Welcome to American media.
You don't need to buy the book. You need to ensure that your digital ecosystem is consistent. You need to make sure that every platform that talks about you says the same thing. All your profiles all match up. You don't need to buy the book. I think the book would help you in terms of your approach to what you're doing. Philosophically, it gives you a foundational base and a direction. But certainly I'm not trying to sell the book in any particular way, but I am saying look after your digital ecosystem, because Google is constantly looking over your shoulder, digesting that, and then reproducing that to your audience. And you want to make sure that when it does that, what Google is showing your audience when they Google your brand name, your personal name, or your book name is what you intended them to see, what you want them to see, and what will convince them that you are the right solution for what they're looking for.
Beautiful. Jason, it's been a pleasure talking to you. And I will do what you're not willing to do, which is the fundamentals of brand SERPs for business. I think it is a good book. I think it is worth getting. And I don't say that for all the people I talk to. But something like this for people who are authors who are trying to get their name out there, it's like the Rosetta Stone to the language of the internet, to the language of how people are going to find you. So I think there's a lot of value to it. And when you get done with your next book, let me know and we'll have another conversation.
Right. The next book's going to be in 2 or 3 months, and it's going to be more geeky, but definitely. And I'll tell you what, I love the reference, Rosetta Stone. And honestly, I would buy my own book. So that's as close to bigging myself up as you're going to get me.
Beautiful. All right, Jason, it's been a pleasure talking to you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye, David.
Thank you for watching. Please consider hitting the subscribe button.